given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Connie has come up with this great idea, and I think it's definitely something worth discussing. It's about accountability. Are we willing to take accountability? I'm just going to give a transition of where this idea came from. So we did a show the other day, and we were talking about blind spots. And, of course, we're talking about blind spots, the physical layout. But we also have a lot of blind spots in ourselves that stops us from growing in this career. And a big part of that is, are we willing to take accountability for the mistakes that we make? But it's not that easy, because it's not just about us wanting to take the accountability. It's also about us being placed in an environment that allows us to take the accountability. So if I make a mistake, am I going to be disciplined? Or are you going to give me a chance to learn from that mistake? And I think that's where the trust factor comes in. So this is going to be a very interesting dialogue. Connie, I think this is a great idea. Connie, author, how's everything going, Connie?
Hello. Everything is good over here. Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall, and I am an author, the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. So I thank you, all of you guys, for your support, for purchasing the book, for tuning into the podcast. Like, it's really just been a great journey with you all, and I appreciate all of your support.
Yeah, you know what? I'll be honest with you. Just let the audience know, guys, if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Again, I have my book on the market, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. It's doing very well. The feedback is great. And I don't even look to see how many I sold. I think it's the same as Connie. What I'm kind of looking at is I want the feedback. Like, did I do it? And so far, the comments are really, they're humbling. So it means the world to me to know that, people are accepting what I have put out there. And same thing with you, Connie, of course, too. I mean, that's what motivates you. It's not about the money. What motivates you is, do people like the product? And so far, I
got mine. I hope you all got yours. I got mine.
The author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon bought my book. Oh my. But me and Connie are just thrilled, because in the end, the feedback motivates us. We were given a chance to possibly write a series of books, which we're going to start doing. Again, these are very insightful books, so we want to make sure that we put these books together. That's not just for rookies, that seniors could take something from it as well. And that's what makes the process fun, but also it's very engaged. But definitely something we're going to be interested in, as long as the feedback keeps coming positive. We're definitely probably going to put our minds together, probably sometime around March or April, to put a book out there for correctional management. So we may see some videos coming out on this channel that's going to gear towards correctional management. And then we'll probably start crafting a book based on the dialogues that we have, because really the books are kind of like the dialogues that have evolved. And that's what makes it not 101. But I'm looking forward to that journey with you, Connie. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks to you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor. And when we come back, we're going to discuss accountability. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it. It's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
All right, and thank you guys for listening to our sponsor. So, Connie, I like how you transitioned the blind spot to personal accountability. So where did that come from today?
So I don't know. It was initially just like a thought of, the blind spot, the actual physical blind spot in a facility could be good if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, right? But I think the other side to that is that you can't see what's on the other side of that blind spot. And so it really made me think about what are the things that prevent us from seeing the other side, right? And so I think those are the things that do create those blind spots in our careers, right? Whether it's fear, I'm so afraid, right? I can't see an opportunity, or I'm so afraid, or I'm so angry, right? Which is something I think a lot of us deal with. You know, something happens in the administration, it gets you, it pisses you off, right? And you could be so consumed with that anger that it now creates a blind spot. So when there are good things that are presented to you, you can't even see it because you're so angry. So that's kind of where it came from.
Right. And lack of personal accountability, it doesn't matter the position you're in. I mean, you could be on the higher level of administration and not be willing to admit that maybe a mistake you made in policy is affecting the front line. You know what's funny? You start to see this accountability. You start to see if your staff does it or not when a code happens and maybe there is an error. You know, some people will be quick to push it on policy. Frontline may be quick to, frontline may be quick to push it on policy. Management may be quick to, push it on the front line. But at the end, we're not really looking to see what the real concern is. We're actually looking just to pass the buck and kind of, it's not me, and it really does come about when you have those emergency situations where maybe there's a lot of liability, maybe there's some serious consequences. And what everybody does, instead of, maybe stepping up and saying, yeah, this was me, I dropped the ball, because again, they're afraid, where's the trust? If I say that, what's going to happen to my career? What's going to happen to my livelihood? What they'll do is, no way, it was my fault, because you're in survival mode now. I'm in survival mode, so my natural instinct is probably to blame somebody else. And I would like to think that we're at this part now where when you have those emergencies, we should be working together to see what the issues are and build together, but we're still building things separately. So when there is an issue and we look to resolve it, we kind of look to resolve it in a manner that's biased, where, well, whatever resolution has to happen, sure, is not going to happen based on anything I did wrong. So now you want it, it kind of makes sense, because, you have to be, when an incident happens, everybody has to sit back objectively and say, okay, what could we have done better? That's the key. Not what could you have done better, and maybe not even so much what could I have done better. What could we have done better? Because that includes the I, that includes the you. But do you think that's correct, Connie? You think when we have an incident that's major where we should be looking to work together to grow, we tend to separate because we're more worried about the consequences of admitting fault?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we have to be honest about the environment, right? So many cultures in these facilities are based on sort of that environment of blame and cover your tail, right? And so if you can't safely come forward and hold yourself accountable, right, like people will tend to not do that. And I think the great thing about what you said about we versus I is that we're all a part of the process, right? So it could have been something someone else did that may have caused you to take the action you took. So it's all connected. It's not like, oh, you decided to do something independently, but it could be sort of that trickle down effect, because these are the actions the person before you took. These are the ways that you responded. And then those were the ways the next person responded. And it could be an all out shit show, right? But there's a chain of events. We all had our hand in the mix of that. And so we let us look at how we could have done things better or done things differently means that we're all in this together. And I think the more that we create a safe space that we are all in this together and it's not looking to point the finger at any one person, is the more likely we're going to have people who are willing to come forward to say, just to own it. This is what I did. I think I might have messed up, like whatever that is.
Yeah. And you know what? When we look at personal accountability, I'm going to say just the opposite is to blame, right? That's what you just said. And I agree with that, which means that so in some, let's say something major happens. There could be a routine that is just, well, it's got to be management's fault or it's got to be front line's fault. Could become a habit, actually. So there would be obviously a lot of us versus them, generalized animosity, because even if it may not be anyone from management there specifically, we'll find a way to blame management. Well, maybe a flaw in the policy or something. And even sometimes with management, I know the policy is on point, and I don't know how they messed up. But hold on. You're already coming in with the wrong type of attitude, though. What you should come in is put the policy on the table, put the players in, and let's discuss if it really is on point, before we start, pointing the fingers at everyone else. So definitely the personal accountability, the opposite end of that. Look where it can lead to. So personal accountability, just by what's on the other end of that, could show you that it could be better for the facility as long as we allow individuals to step up and admit that they made fault. And when they do step up, it's not about discipline. It's about, how do we go ahead and educate and
But
form.
even with what you just said, when you said the person came in saying the policy is good, I know the policy is good, right? Like there's a blind spot in that, right? In that you're coming in already assuming that you know every single detail of that policy and every single detail of the event or incident, right? Which you don't. So like, until you actually do take that policy and you take the players and you start to insert them into the situation, only then will it reveal whether or not there was something we missed. And I think because, some of these policies are, traditional, they've been here, we know them, right? But like sometimes there are those little, I don't want to say loopholes, but they're those little slight, I don't know, break gaps. Maybe something could have happened that it doesn't quite meet the criteria for this particular directive, right? And so I feel like every event that I've had, I don't know of any of them being the same, right? There's always some slight in the variables that are involved. And so it could be that slight. That's where there's a gap in our policy, right? And so when we come in already saying, well, this is the policy and I know this and I know that, like that already presents a blind spot for us because we are now closed to the possibility that something else could have contributed to the outcome.
Yeah, you know what, Connie, you're so spot on because, policies look very good on paper until where it's applied. Now the policy doesn't stand alone. It's amidst other policies that has to come out, find its way into our active world. So yeah, I agree 100%. If you're walking as management thinking that, my policy worked before you even get a chance to talk to the people that have applied it, then you yourself are not given a chance to say, well, yeah, it's me. Maybe it is me. So I think the best way for us to do that is to have that we approach because, prior to this dialogue, there is a divide. And the divide really can easily be seen when there are moments of emergency in which there could be a slip up and you see everybody backed into their own corner, avoiding the other person blaming. It's true. And there's never a person in the middle saying, hey, guys, let's bring us together and let's look at this collectively as one, to see what we could have done better. Instead, the culture of a lot of agencies put people into survival mode. They do. You want to take accountability. Someone's going to take accountability. And if you don't take, they put the pressure where people are forced to go to the corner because at this point, really, the funny thing is that no one's looking to resolve the issue for the future, but rather they're looking to get through the discipline that can happen today. Does that make sense, kind of? You see you laughing. Are we on the same page?
No, we're definitely on the same page because the first thing I was thinking about is usually we are just trying to put out the fire, right? And it's not until the fire is out that someone may take some steps back and say, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? How do we make sure we put some things in place that either support or prevent, right? And I think you have to want or be willing to change your status quo in order to actually have that thought. And a lot of people don't want change. Like we've been doing it this way all the time. This is the way it always worked. and I sometimes, I don't want to like fault the historians, right? Because there's always historians in all of our organizations. Well, we did this because of XYZ that happened 25 years ago, right? Like so much has changed in our landscape that like, okay, that happened 25 years ago. Here's why that wouldn't happen again, just because maybe we have other policies and procedures in place. I mean, dare I say, we've got technology in place that could prevent a lot of things that maybe happened way back when won't happen again now. Not to say it will never happen again, but like our policy doesn't have to be built off of something that's antiquated. And so the moment that we come together and we can say, okay, so here's what we can do in the future to make sure that this doesn't happen again, I think that's where a lot of feathers get ruffled, right? Because people aren't necessarily always willing to embrace change. And, that means I have to learn something else. That means you're going to pull me out of my comfort zone, because a lot of what we do it because it's routine, right? Whereas what I'm saying is that some of the routines may serve as a blind spot for us, because now we're not open to doing something outside of the routine, right? Because I don't have to think about the routine as opposed to this new thing that you want to throw at me, right? So I think it's really great that we could have that conversation that says, instead of focusing on the blame, instead of just focusing on the fire, let's focus on why this happened and how we can make sure it doesn't happen again. That way our staff is never put in the line of fire again, right? Because we do want to protect them. And sometimes in the heightened emotions of a code, of an incident, whatever it is, some things may get missed. And I'm not saying like, because we're not perfect, right? But like, are there some stopgaps that we, some fail safes that we can put in place to make sure? And I think the more we start thinking progressively in that manner, the better we are as an industry.
Yeah, you know what? I still believe that we tend to collectively punish, which means a good employee may be treated the same as an employee that's just negligent. And again, that stops the good employee from taking accountability, or could stop the good employee from taking accountability. And I would also like to think, guys, that personal accountability would lead to growth, because if we're open to admit that we made mistakes, maybe when those mistakes get further looked into, it may not be necessarily a mistake that's really solely on the individual. Maybe it is a we mistake, which is a mixture of the individual's efforts tied in with policy and whatever it is that has to bring things together. Because usually the mistakes probably occur when I would like to think that we're pretty good departmentally at what we need to do, but usually the interactions of, the different departments or whatever it is. But sometimes there are mistakes that happen departmentally, obviously. But for me, as I start to move up, I really feel that the departments usually understand what's best for their needs. But a lot of mistakes usually happen when the departments have to intertwine, and there's just not that communication or understanding of where these policies need to intercede. Again, we still have those departmental mistakes, but for the most part, it's really the connection. Now, with that said, there's something else I thought we can add. So when it comes to accountability, as I mentioned, could lead to growth, right? Because again, it could bring an open dialogue that's probably not being had because the fear of being written up. But you also have to realize that the pressure from above, because it allows the accountability to exist or not exist, because if the pressure is just a CYA pressure where write the person up, then the pressure is not allowing for accountability to exist, which means I'm going to go as far as saying, because policies and procedures, the evolution of any agency is built on the lifeblood, the do's and don'ts. If you have a facility that hides the don'ts because they're afraid of getting in trouble, you're never going to see a facility that's going to evolve in a manner that really is beneficial for the people first, then obviously for the agency as a whole, like a vision, if you will. And that really does start with the pressures for management saying, okay, now high level pressure. So I'm even talking about the pressure that's above the policy makers, the pressure that's above admin. My pressure in admin so much to produce a result of discipline that now they make an environment that cannot be trusted. There is no personal level of accountability. And then the funny thing is, Connie, what you said, and I do agree with it, that pressure that scares people away from accountability because there's no trust, will mess with the growth of an agency, because there's probably mistakes that are still happening that are being thrown under the rug instead of just trying to see where we can build. Because I believe the biggest part of how a facility evolves, yeah, part of it's by success, don't get me wrong, but a big part of it is through the mistakes. Because if you don't make mistakes, then you don't learn. So, I mean, what's your thoughts about pressure relating to accountability?
I mean, the pressure, of course, drives the accountability, right? We know that that added pressure is kind of going to force people into it because people don't want the pressure, right? I don't want to work like this. So what do I need to do to alleviate that pressure? I'm going to find a solution to that pressure point so that I don't have to feel it. And so that's just a reality. I think that's sort of the natural progression. And maybe the pressure is necessary in order to force change, right? So good or bad, pressure is there, right? But I also do agree that once that pressure is applied, and we can come up with some best practices, right? Like I think that we are going to learn from the don'ts, but I feel like the don'ts should not be hidden. The don'ts are what's going to kind of put others on alert. Let's raise everyone's awareness that we do have some don'ts. This is what the don'ts look like. Because then when you're faced in a situation, you're like, oh, I remember. Like, this is one of those things that we don't do. Like, I mean, yeah, we should all be well-versed or fluid in the policies and procedures and such. But I feel like when that pressure comes from up top, and we're kind of being forced into this space of evolution, we're being forced to change. Like, I feel that we cannot ignore that there's some things that won't be included in our evolution. And we're not going to include those things that just don't promote us evolving in a manner that is going to be able to move the organization forward. That's going to ultimately relieve that pressure point that they're feeling at the top.
Yeah, and what's scary about that, though, is that's when you start to see the flaws of higher level management. Guys, think about this, guys. If you work in a culture that only looks for the good and really kills the negative to the point where people are hiding up their mistakes, then the people that could get promoted could have shit in their closet that you don't realize until finally the closet gets overfilled and it starts to open. You know what I'm saying? No, I believe that makes sense. I believe that if you promote a culture that's not trustworthy, the people that, may move up may not be as evolved as we think they are. Just think about it, man. I'm not gonna, if I know I'm gonna get in trouble, I'm not gonna admit it, right? So I start hiding that stuff. But I like to think that people that are good managers right now, let me rephrase that. The people that are great leaders, some of them could have been made a lot of mistakes, but then they get better as those mistakes, they learn from those mistakes. So for someone to sit there and said they had a perfect career, or it looks like they have a perfect career, the first thing I'm going to say, because maybe I'm jealous, I don't know, is you haven't been challenged. Not in corrections, because you're telling me you've had a perfect career. That means to me you haven't made any choices. Right? I think we're hitting some buttons here, Connie. I know the front line will definitely agree with that. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just think about those. Like, when you said that, the first thing I thought about is how many times did my central office come down to the facility and say, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, right? I need you to do these things. And honestly, you've never worked in the facility to understand that operationally, that's just not doable, right? And so when you think about this expectation for you to work perfectly, like, it just doesn't happen. There's so many challenges. Like, if you're really in the thick of what's going on in your facility, you're faced with new challenges every day. I don't care where you're posted at. You are faced with new challenges every day. And there is no book that's going to tell you that this is the thing you need to do. There's no policy, no procedure for all the things that come up. And so if we have not done a good job establishing an environment where people are going to be able to make those mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And I'm not saying like some mistakes just aren't so egregious that there has to be some consequence. I get it. Those are out there. But there has to be a safe place that here it is. I'm faced with all this new situation. I've never dealt with these variables before. Like, I think automatically I think about recently there's the article about introducing medical marijuana into the prisons. right? Like, what is that going to do? There is no policy, no procedure in place for anybody, for medical. Like, so granted, maybe medical, there's some stuff out in the community, but what that looks like in a prison, we don't know, right? And so what does that look like for officers, right? Like, that's something new for them to deal with. And you can't tell me that as staff are on the front line trying to work with these new situations, you got the transgender population coming. That's a whole new situation that everyone's trying to figure out. What do I need to do? How do I need to do it? And then if I make a mistake, you're telling me that like I could lose my job, right? Like, what all I'm saying in this space is that our reality is that there's a lot of pressure. We're always faced with new challenges. And if in your career you have not been faced with a new challenge, I feel like you are probably that team player who's in the back saying, I'm going to help, but they're not getting their hands dirty. You know, like, because if you are on the front line and you're in the thick of this stuff that's happening, you're part of the decisions, like, yeah, we mess up. Like, that's just what we do. And then we fix it. We learn from it. You know, that's just our reality.
Right. And as you were talking, by the way, I was texting myself some notes, because you're right. The marijuana, I mean, that's going to be a whole MAT programs when they first start. I mean, there's going to be a lot of trial by fire, you know. I mean, some of the times I find myself scrambling at work to correct my own mistakes, you know, but in the process, learning, and I may make the mistake again. You know, it's just because, again, you know, you're faced with situations that are novel every day, you know, and to think that you have something written that you could follow. And sometimes, you know what the funny thing is sometimes people act before they even, oh, there is a policy on that, you know. But when you become good at what you do, again, this is just through experience. Sometimes you don't have to read the policy to know that this should be done. Of course, I'm not recommending that always, you know, read policy, but sometimes you have to make a decision. You don't have the policy right in front of you, you know, so you got to make a decision, which is really the experience coming in your head, which, you know, and as long as you can, you know, explain why you had to make that decision. Because sometimes we do it all the time in the admin level. I don't have a copy of every policy at home, and something strange may happen, and I may have to just deal with it in the moment and then just figure out, you know, hey, you know, maybe the policy said for me to do it this way, but I only had seconds to make a decision, you know. So now imagine frontline living in that moment, you know. So again, you know, it's really, it's outcome matters. Don't get me wrong. Of course, the outcome matters, but the outcome should not minimize the intent. Okay. So if the outcome, you know, sometimes outcomes go astray, but please, before you start throwing the book at everyone, look at the intent, because good officers are going to make bad mistakes, but the intent does not, the intent shouldn't be generalized, if that makes sense. Like the outcome's the outcome. I understand that. But, you know, treating an officer who's negligent versus an officer who's on point and can explain why they made that decision, they shouldn't be treated in the same manner, same fashion, because it only makes good officers hesitant. And Connie, when it comes to accountability, just to kind of touch on some points again, just to make sure, the first thing is you need a trusting environment, correct? I mean, we went over that multiple times, right? If you have an environment that you cannot trust, you wind up having employees that hide their mistakes. So if I'm walking around at this facility as a manager or as a supervisor, you know, and I start seeing all these mistakes, you know, small mistakes, nothing major, you know, but let's say it's not one or two, but it's just a whole mess of things. Because don't forget, these mistakes, if not addressed properly, could become the norm. You know, again, that's where complaints, because these mistakes could be based on convenience. You know, maybe, you know, these mistakes happen because, you know, we did something because it was convenient. Now it became the norm. And now you start to see that, you know, these mistakes are kind of routine. So when you start seeing that these mistakes are happening, and it's not just from one individual, but it's from multiple individuals, as management, it may be hard for you to do this, but maybe you should look back at the culture of your facility. Do you allow people to say when they made a mistake, or do you just quick to go after them? I think if you don't allow people to come up and say they made a mistake, one thing is they won't go to you for advice, so they may not even know they made a mistake. You know, that's another thing. Sometimes mistakes doesn't mean we know we made a mistake. I mean, I like to think that's the case. I like to be a person that people can trust. So they come to me for advice. And if discovered in the advice that they made a mistake, then we work on it together to fix it. But if you have this culture where the facility is just kind of routine, mistake, I would actually go back as management and start looking at yourself saying, you know, are you trusted enough where if someone is not even so much admitting to make a mistake, but if they wanted advice on something, would you give them that advice objectively, or would you question the origins of that advice? Like automatically after you have this dialogue, go back to their immediate supervisor and say, you better check on him because it looks like that person's been messing up since day one. Does that make sense? Or
yeah, I mean, we do. We have to set the stage for personal accountability. We have to set the stage for trust and for individuals to know that they could come forward, even if it's not something to blame, right? So if I went through a policy and I feel like there's something that could be improved on the policy, right? I should also be able to come forward with my working knowledge and say, and present a suggestion. I know that there's many institutions that are not interested in what you think you've learned, right? But I've come with fresh eyes, right? And I feel like even if this person is presented something and they feel like, you know, it's not feasible or whatever the reason for rejection is, you know, I just feel like we have a responsibility to set the stage for the staff to come forward, whether it's something good or something bad, to know that they're going to be supported, to know that we're going to hear them out, and that if there is a consequence, that we know enough about them that we're going to respect them and have a conversation as professionals, as opposed to feeling like I'm being sent to the principal's office, I'm going to get in trouble, you know, like, because that's never a good feeling, I think, for anybody. And I don't know how many managers are out there intentional about setting the stage for trust. How do we set the stage to look for the good, right? Because usually we're like, oh man, I mean, that's the environment we're in, right? Like, look at all the crooks, right? I've heard that a million times, right? And so because we're not trusting in the environment, it's sometimes hard to give each other the benefit of the doubt. And we have to be able to do that. We've got to start learning and knowing our employees well enough to say, that person wouldn't just do that. If they've come forward and they told me that X, Y, or Z has happened, we need to hear that person out, because that's not the person's intention. That's not that person's character. You know, we know them well enough. And now, granted, we can't fall back on that alone. We know that sometimes good people do bad things, right? So it's not like we're going to be ignorant to that. It's just saying that we want to make sure that we encourage good behavior. And good behavior is holding yourself accountable, being able to go to your manager and say, hey, this is what I did. I'm not sure, or it doesn't feel right. Maybe I'm the one who messed it up. I mean, I never forget, somebody misplaced their keys in a facility and they were trying to find these keys before coming forward to say that they misplaced their keys. Now, that's a big deal that you misplace your keys in a prison, right? But how long are you going to wait before you tell somebody? And then just think about the trickle effect. So when you write your report about these misplaced or keys, what time are you going to say you identified your keys were misplaced? Because if you were looking for an hour, we should have been called the code an hour ago. How many people have already left the facility and your keys could have gone with them? So it's just kind of like, I mean, that's kind of like off topic, but on. It's like, we've got to create the space for people to come forward, hold themselves accountable. And even though we know that there's going to be some kind of consequence, our reality is that we're trying to see the best in our staff. And we're not looking to kind of just, you know, get people losing their jobs.
Well, you know, when a mistake is made, I think good staff, they want to confront. They want to go to the channels. They want to do what they can to report they made a mistake, because it feels uncomfortable knowing that anytime that mistake could be discovered. You know, it just sets a conflict. So I would like to think that, you know, there always would be an effort where if I made a mistake, I would like to think I'm not led by just the fact that it's a discipline that can come my way, but also the integrity of it too. There's a balance, you know. But I think what happens, it starts where you may have good people make a mistake, and they kind of see that, well, you know what, if I take accountability for this, I'm getting treated like someone who is negligent, who doesn't do their job, and I don't want to be treated like that. One thing I also think it's unfair. I've made one mistake, this person made 20. And don't forget, sometimes people unfair, like you have an employee that made 20 mistakes, and then when they see that the person that made one mistake doesn't get in trouble like they did, and they made the same mistake, well, it's because you had 20 mistakes, you know, and they only had one. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy that way, believe it or not. You know, this person only made one, you made 20. I don't care if the mistakes are identical. The point is, you have a history that says that this is the next step with you, and this person has a history that says he can be taught. You know, this person can be cultivated. But the first thing I think where the shift changes is that one thing is, I don't want to be treated like this person. And I know that's the type of management. I'm going to make one mistake and they're just going to come at me for that one mistake. Then the second thing is going to be is I start to hide it, you know, in an effort, because, you know, now think about that. A good employee is also based on integrity. A big part of us in corrections is integrity, which relates to accountability, you know. So what are you also cultivating? You're cultivating dishonesty among staff that are supposed to be, one, obviously professional, but we're defined by integrity. So now you have an environment that if the staff can't trust you as management, then I think the adverse to that is that you obviously can't trust them. Mm-hmm. And how sad is that? And that comes from that us versus them mentality. Like, if you're walking in a facility right now where you have the front line, and it really does deal with the accountability. I believe a big us versus them mentality comes from the accountability factor, that everybody gets pushed into survival mode and they start blaming each other. So what happens here is, if I get pushed into an environment where, you know, I'm constantly blaming management, you know, for even the mistakes I make, and then management, you know, of course, is blaming me, you know, think about the culture right there. We don't trust each other. We don't trust each other to speak the truth. You know, we don't. Because in the end, most likely, if there are, the world is not so isolated to the point where everything's going to be 100% an individual. If we look at things as a team, like we mentioned before, then we look at mistakes as a way of, you know, let's put us all together. Like we mentioned, what could we have done, you know, together as a team to make sure this doesn't happen again? Which also means, what could we have done to stop one of our peers from making the mistake that they made? So think about this. Let's say, and we're saying mistakes, guys. We're not talking about negligence. Mind you, we're not talking about excessive uses of force. We're not talking about criminal acts. We're talking about mistakes that happen because you are human, right? And which happens. You can't say it's not going to happen. Especially if you're in an active facility and you're making choices every day, you're going to make a wrong choice. So what I would like to say is, even if I made a bad choice, right, it would be great for people to say, you know what, Gange, you made a bad choice, you know, so maybe 50% of this concern is on you. But we're going to split the other 50 here. And we're going to make sure that together we move up at 100%. So some of the people right now may be looking at it, it's either management or front line. It's either management or front line. I would like to say a majority of the mistakes that happen are probably in the middle. You know, again, not negligence, guys. Mistakes. It's probably in the middle where we could split it and grow. I mean, would you agree to that when it comes to that level of accountability?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, the taking the perspective of we're all in this together, I think certainly has a way of making it more comfortable to come forward, because, you know, but I think with that also comes objectivity, right? Like, whoever is in the space to make the assessment of what's going on is the person who would be tasked with being objective, right? Where they can actually say, well, you know, the person did make this decision. However, our policy also says this, right? And I think that's where you see staff who can finally say, like, okay, so they weren't just out to get me. Like, because I feel like we got to kind of undo some of the negative that's already in the thought process, right? Like, yeah, you know, they're just looking to blame somebody for this. I happen to be the fall guy. You know, like, how do we undo that? Whether it happened 100 times or it only happened once, how do we share in the responsibility for the decisions that the staff are making? How do we say you're empowered, but then I don't support you in your empowered space, right? Like, I think we send mixed messages by doing that. I can't say you're empowered to make these decisions because these things are happening all the time on your unit. But then when you do make a decision, it may not be the one I would have agreed with, or it may be the one that ended in a negative outcome. Now I say, oh, you were empowered, but, and I feel like we can't continue to send that message. It is, yes, here are all the decisions that are in the scope of your job duties every day. And you are going to make mistakes here and there. It happens. And I think it matters that you highlighted the difference between a mistake and just negligence, right? But if in fact you've made a mistake, as managers, here's how we're going to support your empowered space. And I don't know that a lot of that happens.
You know, I love it. I love the fact that you used empowered space. Very motivational, actually, what you just said, because that means as a supervisor, this is your area. You know, I'm not micromanager. I love that. And we've had discussion on that before. You know, maybe the approach is not so much talking about accountability here, but accountability in an effort to be constructive and evolve, right? So it's not accountability for discipline, technically. It's just accountability of evolving, you know? But the funny thing is maybe it's the approach we had. You know, as I said, we have that blame culture going on, right? Or what have I done wrong? But what about if we could have maybe approached it what could have been done better? You know, and that involves pretty much not just the individual, but you know, our interactions maybe with that individual who made a mistake. You know, I mean, you know, I would love for someone to kind of just say, you know, Gange, I know you made a mistake. Maybe next time this is what we could do to make sure you don't make that mistake again. You know, maybe because now think about it. If I make a mistake, we're a team, right? And it's funny because some people will say, well, yeah, we're a team. Yeah, you may consider yourself a team, but how come you only take the successes and isolate the failures? You know, the being a team means that you share in both, and being a leader, if you're a leader, you give the successes to your people, but you share in the failures. You know, so a little bit of but being a team is, if someone does make a mistake, are we promoting an environment where the peers all get together to see what could have been done together? And if there is a mistake, and again, mistake, not negligence, do we all go up as a team and kind of take a level of responsibility with that individual so we can cultivate that growth? You know, so that person doesn't feel like they're alone when they have to admit that a mistake has happened. Or even our peers, do they go the opposite way? And now I'm forced to do this alone, where we're promoting teamwork, yes, but it seems to be only teamwork when it's convenient. So, you know what I'm saying? So, like, I listen, in the end, teamwork is the balance of success and failures, right? I always found it more comforting if I had a leader next to me and said, Gage, I know you messed up. Let's go see the lieutenant together. You know, let's go see the admin together. We'll go through this together. You're not alone. Because even if you made a mistake, I'm going to be there to vouch for your character. I'm going to balance something for you. You know what I mean? So I want you to say exactly what happened. I want you to be totally honest. And then I will go ahead and vouch for your character and who you are. And then as a team, how we won't let this happen again. That's how you cultivate growth in my mind. Because also think about it from the higher level. Think about it from the supervisor who's now looking down, right? Saying, wow, look at this. I would love it if my supervisors, you know, came with those employees and had that dialogue. And through the supervisor's eyes, I trust that they're going to take care of this concern. And then I see how that will play out. But Connie, how powerful is that when the peers come together and we'll do this as one?
Yeah, that's amazing, because that in of itself is teaching the others, whether it's your other colleagues, it's teaching managers how, in fact, you truly support someone, right? Like, so if I'm going to come with you, this is no longer you're in this by yourself, right? Like I'm here with you, which means I'm supporting you through that whole process. And I feel like many times, like the sharing in the successes or sharing in the failures, you know, people pick and choose when they're going to extend themselves. And, you know, I think the power in us going together, whether it's a success or a failure, is amazing. I think though also that has to be part of the process. It can't just be on an individual basis, right? Like, so even if I've got like the worst person, right, we're still a team, whether I got great people or sucky people. If that's the process, which is, okay, we're going to do an after action review. And whether it's good or bad, we're going to all go together and get through it, right? Because all of us together, the collective intelligence is better than the one person who's going there on their own, right? Because we've all got a different perspective. And maybe what I saw might have been different from that person's interpretation of the same situation. And now you've got a manager who's far removed probably from the situation, who's now tasked with making a decision. So even from the manager's perspective, if I had 5 people sitting with me, as opposed to trying to make the decision with the information from one person, at least the collective intelligence allows me to make a better decision. It may not be the best decision, it may not be the only, but now I have way more information to work with. So I think it's great if in fact that's something that we actually do.
Yeah, I think the purpose of this dialogue, just to kind of sum it up, is basically to know that personal accountability can only be expected if the environment allows it. Definitely the environment can discourage it. So, I mean, yes, you're going to have people that come in that just don't take personal accountability, even if the environment allows it. We know that. You know, but again, we're looking for the dialogue that changes people, you know, so there will be people that will be motivated to do the right thing. And then somehow the environment discourages that. And that's where I want to make sure that when we have dialogue like this, we kind of steer away from the environments that discourage people from taking accountability. So we could have came at this dialogue one of 2 ways. You know, the one way could be is you got to do what's right all the time and then not look at the reasons why people don't. You know, and what we did was did the opposite. You know, we came in and said, okay, what would stop someone from taking accountability? So we weren't about, you know, going after the people for not doing it. We wanted to go after the environment for not allowing the people to do it. And that's what kind of opened up into this beautiful, one of the best discussions I think we've had. And we always have very insightful ones. I actually was starting to smile, just a little joke, but I don't know where this came from. But as we're having this discussion, by the way, guys, we don't prepare our stuff. So if you guys are still at the end of this video, a little bonus that's irrelevant to the content. But me and Connie tend to be problem solvers, even when our kids are playing Oculus Quest together and they can't find ways to communicate with each other. And then, but the funny thing is when the world went to shit in virtual reality today for both our kids because they couldn't communicate to each other, there was one thing I was able to do today that I can't do in the real world, which is reset everything and start anew. I know sometimes people say, well, I'm not a big thing about resetting and starting anew in the real world because I think it's our mistakes that make us better. You know, a little bit different than in VR. You know, Connie has it in a book about heavy lifting. It's the heavy lifting that makes you the warrior. So sometimes just a matter of removing yourself, seeing what's going on, and then going right back. I don't believe in those automatic resets to start anew. I think what makes us stronger is that we keep on going through the struggle and becoming who we need to be. But once in a while, like in the Oculus Quest, we do get some cheats and we get the reset because we have no idea what the hell our kids are doing to begin with. But having said that, for this dialogue here, believe it or not, if we could look at those mistakes as growth, we don't need the reset button. We don't, because in the end, we're going to beat the game because we're going to know not to make these mistakes again. And I thought that was a very... things happen for a reason, Connie, and I was thinking how I could put that into our dialogue, and there it was. Connie,
no, I like that in the dialogue because the reset, I think, you know, that's the default, right? Can I control alt delete, right? I want to restart. and we just don't get that opportunity. And really, all of the value that we get is we extract that value from all these different situations that happen. It makes us stronger leaders. It makes us more agile. There's so much positivity that these mistakes actually offer us, as long as we're willing to look at them and actually extract the positive from them. Okay, there might have been a discipline, but we'll let that go. Look at how much better I am as an officer, as a professional, right? Look at how much I talk to you guys all the time. The other day, we're on the line with Gary and you, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to take out a notepad, right? Because no matter how much you learn, there's always more to learn. There's always more.
Hey, you know what's funny, Connie? Guys, I kind of, but it's right to have a dialogue off of corrections. But we're real leaders with our kids too, because we didn't let our kids, we took the for about 25, 30 minutes, we're getting nowhere, but we're trying by the way, we can't communicate. So we're on our own separate paths trying to figure out what the problem is. But we're staying motivated. And then the very last resort was, I told Connie, meet up with me in this virtual board where I could write down, because we couldn't communicate with each other. And by the way, we stayed in the problem too, because we could have easily called each other and communicated, but we used adapting and adjusting. We couldn't communicate in VR. We did not cheat and use our cell phones. We found a washboard. We communicated through washboard. And I said, I will be right back. And then I come back after I reset, came back. Connie, can you hear me? Gangi, I could hear you. And the whole world the kids were happy. We were happy. And then I turned around and said to my daughter, don't do that shit again. And then we got downstairs. What I mean? That's how that dialogue ended. You know what I mean? We shared a little bit of the success, but hey, Connie, anything you'd like to say in closing to our audience?
I just want to say, listen, we live and learn, right? We're going to have very challenging times in the facilities. We're going to always be faced with stuff. But at the end of the day, the growth comes when you allow yourself to reflect on these different experiences and see where the value came in, and really sharing in those experiences, right? Because, we talked about how we hide those mistakes, but you never know how your mistake may protect someone else. Your mistake may help someone else to be safe and go home safe that night. So I get it. You may not want to necessarily broadcast your mistakes because there may be some consequences, but those mistakes are the way that we all grow.
And just on the adverse of that, just in case we have to be aggressive in promoting accountability outside of what we just said, mistakes could also affect the safety of your partner as well. So there's obviously reasons to motivate you. But I would like, also to see what the environment can do to further that motivation. But technically, it really is about the integrity. It is. It's about the integrity. So if you have people that have integrity coming in, what can the environment do to reinforce that integrity, to keep that path on that side consistent with what we expect as professionals? As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's gonna notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.